Good morning. Welcome. 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 I love you all, our spiritual family. Today I wanted to talk about the difficult lives, those who are forced into a life of spirituality. You could say condemned into a life of spirituality. Because almost invariably, from the beginning of your life that you can remember, you have felt that you don't fit in this world. The world bothers you. Maybe it seems so ordinary and flat and uninspiring, and it doesn't capture your imagination at all. You don't understand how people can live the way they do, respect the things that they respect, and find interesting the things that they find interesting. Because you can't find anything in there, in this mundane world, that you really like. You feel a restlessness to experience something else, maybe to attain something else. The mundane world does not interest you. Relationships may interest you for a while as an escape from the mundane world, but you're always brought back into the mundane world, even in relationships that are great. As long as one person is still in the mundane world, the other person is also. One way that I stay out of the mundane world is to meet with you, my family, once or twice a week. And that often does it for several days. But the mundane world pulls at me because of my relationship with mundane people. And as long as I pay attention to all of the different things I have to do as chores every day, it's so hard to stay out of the mundane world. It's very dry in the mundane world. You get up and you say, oh, the things I have to do today. And it seems like such a burden. You've got 300 things to do. Even meditation can get to be mundane unless the meditation is deep enough to get you into the void. And in the void, all of your concerns are gone. But coming out of the void, you come back into the mundane world. The koan, or the Heart Sutra, says, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Feeling, thought, and consciousness are also like this. So the mundane world arises out of the void. And as long as you're in the void, in meditation, things are fine. But when you come out, you're back into the mundane world, even if you're in the middle of a Japanese monastery on Mount Baldy or anywhere else. It's very difficult to stay out of the mundane world. For me, I remember my spiritual life started when I was about 11 and was reading a book called In the Woods of God Realization. And I had some spiritual experiences back then. I don't remember what it was, but it was like a sweet divinity blew through me for a few minutes. And I felt, this is it. It took me many, many years to find something like that again. Mostly, the work of a spiritual person is endless. It's endless. Endless meditation, endless reading, endless spiritual practices like self-inquiry or forcing yourself to love something or somebody in order to get beyond the mundane world. The mundane world is the world we grew up in, the milieu within which we grew up from the time we were small to now. It's an American, mid-American world, a Southern world, a European world of convention. The terms are all conventional terms. The spirituality is all conventional spirituality. The morality is all convention. And our world is limited by these conventions. The length and breadth of the world and what we're allowed to do in it is all prescribed and written down as the boundaries of our life. And if we're totally concerned all day long with the conventional world, we're fucking trapped. That's all we know. Karima likes to watch crime shows. And often I sit with her watching crime shows. And the element is they all believe that there's something worth pursuing in the mundane world. Whether it's money or love, loyalty, some sort of possession, $1 million heist, a $3 million heist, retirement on some South Sea island on the beach, which never happens. And if it does, they get bored on the beach within a week. Because no matter where they go, they carry their own restlessness with them. Their own dis-ease of being alive in the world. Part of it is we know deep down that the conventional world has nothing to do with us. That this world we live in is not our world. Our world is far, far different. It's just that we don't know how. We may have dreams about our world, but they're just based on memories and projections from the mundane world we live in during the daytime. We awaken in the morning in the mundane world. there's a moment of maybe 3 seconds where the world and self-consciousness doesn't exist. And Robert calls it the gap. And we have to get to know the gap in order to escape the mundane world. But then the mundane world crashes down on us, and we feel caught into the same old, same old. Some people go on a lot of vacations all over the world to get away from the mundane world. But we just go to the mundane world of other people. The mundane world in Indonesia, the mundane world in India, the mundane world in Japan, the very, very mundane world in Holland or Germany. Where do you suppose the most mundane world is in the world? What's the most mundane place? I think it's located right around where Angela lives. It's the epicenter of mundanity.
At the time, I'm also in Holland, and it's not that mundane.
You're
I'm on a
visiting
small,
Holland now?
yes, I'm on holiday on a small island, Ameland. I think Angela knows it. Quite beautiful, peaceful, and not so mundane, joyful. So I will contradict you in this point.
Thank you for nothing. Okay. So how do we get out of the mundane world? One way, and I think it has to be practiced by everybody for some time or other, is to concentrate on your own inner world experiences instead of the mundane world. You have to be in isolation. You have to sort of ignore family and friends. Ignore your job, quit your job. Just pay attention to your own self and the extreme complexity of your own self. Your anxieties, your depression, your loneliness, you're feeling too hot or too cold, generally just feeling uncomfortable being in your skin. This is contrary to what our intuition tells us, to escape into the void or nothingness. But really, we have to find all of this stuff inside of ourselves that makes ourselves uncomfortable. The loneliness, the despair, the anger, the rage, the feeling isolated, cut off. And we have to dive into it. And it seems like diving into death, like going over Niagara Falls without a barrel. It seems certain to bring death. The loneliness, the physical pains we feel inside, whether it's in our belly, our chest, or the awful loneliness some feel. Being alone in a world where nobody understands you or cares about you. And if they do care about you, you can't feel it really, because you feel so isolated, cut off. But this has to be known. This has to be felt. And in that feeling, it's going to be transcended eventually. All that contraction that you feel, all that despair you feel, by acknowledging it and accepting it and even loving it, it becomes dissolved in us. It becomes dissolved in our steady, empty attention. You may have to hang on to it for years before it dissolves. And every day you're a little bit miserable for it, because not only are you in a mundane world, but you go inside of yourself to find the source of that mundanity, and it's you, and you can't make it disappear. By will, by insight, by reading, or by directly feeling it. You've entered the center of mundanity, which is all the fractures inside of yourself, all the mess inside of yourself, all the confusion inside of yourself. And then Ed says, you have to go in there. You have to know it and feel it. Day after day, week after week, year after year. And you get distracted. Everybody gets distracted. You get distracted by a love affair, by an interesting job that takes your mind off of mundanity for 2 or 3 months, by a vacation, by taking drugs, ayahuasca or something like that, that you think is spiritual, that you think will change your life. And after 10 years of doing this, you still feel caught. But on the other hand, you feel lighter. Your body's not as dense. Your mind is not as dense. Your feelings are not as dense, and they flow more. So maybe 15 years goes by, and you meet your guru. Suddenly life is worth living. You have a teacher, and there's something about him or her, their energy, the way they speak and move, what they say and how you feel around them. You feel mesmerized. You have to go see the guru. And every time in satsang you come, you're uplifted to a different world, a world with energies, a world of high self-worth, a world where you no longer feel mundane and trapped, but which promises liberation. It feels every day like you might be on the cusp of liberation. But it doesn't work out that way. Within a few months, you fall back into your old mundane world. And you realize that you have to struggle more to escape. And maybe you're lucky enough when you're with that guru to hear that all that it takes is to escape your mind. Escape all those concepts, Christian concepts, Buddhist concepts, social liberal concepts, conservative concepts, physics concepts, chemistry concepts. And that happened to me when I was doing self-inquiry, when I was in a shower. and the water was falling on me. And I looked inside of myself and saw the void which I had seen thousands of times before. A dark void that enveloped everything inside my subjective experience of my body. And the water hitting my skin felt so delightful. So almost automatically, I asked myself, who feels this rain falling on my body? Who feels it? And like a million times before, I saw that there was nobody there to take receipt of the experience of having water falling on my skin. There was just void and water falling on my skin, and awareness of water falling on my skin. But there was no I. No matter where I looked, there was no I. And I've been looking for many, many years. And suddenly realized, well, the reason I couldn't find an I is there's none there. There is no I. I feel this, I feel that, I am this way. That I disappeared. And with it came total freedom from the mundane. And over the next few weeks, I watched some amazing things. Like consciousness itself was unreal. It was like a show appearing to me. I, as the void, was separate from anything in consciousness. The states of consciousness came and washed over me like banks of clouds coming in off the sea. Waking consciousness came to me as the sleeper and replaced sleep consciousness. And when it came, the world appeared. And eventually within that world, I became self-conscious. But after a while, sleep came and pushed waking consciousness out of the way. And then there was nothing. Just darkness and quietness with no thought. And then sleep consciousness came and interrupted that vast, dark emptiness of sleep with a dream. And the dream consciousness lasted a certain period of time. And then the darkness came back. Not that I experienced the darkness as darkness at the time, because my mind wasn't there, but the next day, I recognized what it was like to be asleep, and that I had been aware during that sleep of what it was like. And thus has answered the question about, are we aware during sleep? We are aware. But it's not until afterwards that we are aware that we were aware. There's an awareness in sleep. That's how, when somebody calls your name, you can wake up. The energy fills a certain part of your consciousness and you become awake. Maybe one level above the emptiness, that the gap that Robert talks about. So I was free of the mundane world. I saw that the mundane world was just a mind creation, a map superimposed by my mind onto the events in the world around me, which didn't exist within the map of the world that was my mind. We realize that we live in the map of the mind rather than in the real world, and that we have to leave the mind in order to see what the real world looks like, experiences like, feels like. We have to shut the mind down. Now, you can do that forcefully by just preventing any thought from entering consciousness. But that technique will make you stupid and heavy. The real way is to see through the mind, to see that there is no I, that the I points only to emptiness. And then we begin to see that all concepts are not real. The concept of a chair, we know what a chair means, and we can see a chair all around us. The word chair meets or points to billions of chairs. But we live in the mind of chairhood and concepts rather than the feeling of sitting in a chair. So Sansanim says, shut the fuck up. Become dumb as a rock. Meaning, ignore the mind and open your eyes, your ears, and your body to what it's like to be alive without the mind. What is the world like without the mind? And thus, over the next year or two, you have many degrees of opening and realizations, all referring to the absence of mind. Not that it's gone away, it's still there chattering, but you, at the most deep layer of being the source, the witness, no longer believes in the mind. You see the mind for what it is, an instrument that creates mundanity, convention. And you realize that everything you're aware of in the world is not true. It's just mind created. It's literally an unbelievable experience to feel free of the mind. Let the mind do whatever it wants because you don't believe in it anymore. You don't pay attention to it. Most of us pay quite close attention to our thoughts, whatever we're thinking about, planning for a wedding, planning for a funeral, planning for a career, going to school, reading books, having hobbies. What a fucking dull life to be involved in the world and not be involved in finding something higher. Like first is freedom from the mundane world. And secondly, in that freedom from the mundane world, to go beyond altogether, to stay in that beyond until the voice of love calls you. A woman or a man comes into your life, or a cat, or a dog. And at first, when your eyes meet, you feel startled, and a shock goes down from your head to your toes. Your whole body is brought alive with her or him. And thus begins a romance that because you're empty, you're no longer hanging on to the mundane world and what it promises to bring and deliver to you. But you're free of all that. And in the midst of that vast void comes love. a flowing of love, and with it, a sense of devotion, a sense of surrender. You just want to surrender to her or to him. You want to become dirt under their feet. You just feel lost in them. You just want to serve them. Serve Gypsy or Kali. Pick a person to serve in your life. Feel your love for them. And when you feel the love, do you feel the Shakti also? The energy is flowing in your body and around your body. Because that kind of love wakes up Shakti. It's mysterious how loving somebody can reveal a whole new world of energies. Chi, Kundalini, Shakti. They're all different forms of these energies that love can light. Your heart is kindled by the flame of love. And there's nobody there except the other who didn't deliberately kindle it, but it happened to you anyway. As grace, as destiny, and your heart is kindled, and you're filled with joy. You feel these energies. You develop these energies. Maybe you become a healer. You tell others about the energies, because when you feel the energies and the love, even though you're in the mundane world and can function in the mundane world, you're not of it anymore. You have found love, however long it lasts. 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, until that person decides to leave or you decide to leave for whatever reason. But even as you separate, you take back all the energy you had put into that person. You take back all the love that you had devoted to that person and all the surrender you had surrendered to that person. And you take those energies back into yourself. And that's when God comes into you. God feels the depth of your love and devotion. God feels your energies inside. So he appears to you in the form of your choice, whether it's masculine or feminine, whether it's a figure or energies or whatever. He'll appear inside of you in the form that's determined by who you are at that time. Whether it be a form of an angel or a god or a particular looking person. He comes out of you in a awakening experience, a self-realization experience, where you realize not the absolute self. That's already happened to you months before. But this is the manifest self, the self of love, the self of lust, the self of happiness and explosive joy. This is the self of embodiment, of coming out of the absolute, coming out of the silence beyond the mind, and awakening like a bomb inside the voidness, the emptiness everywhere. And you become alive. And you laugh and you laugh and you laugh and you laugh because finally, after 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, you've become alive. You're truly enlightened for the first time. The other enlightenments that you've had up till now are just foreshadowing. But this is the real thing. You've gone 360 degrees. You've gone downwards into the emptiness, found the emptiness, the void that seems so comforting and quiet. And then out of that void is born love. And that love takes you back into incarnation totally, but the mundane world is totally absent because you're filled with love and energies and joy. That's the trip. It can happen the other way around too. It can happen by starting off worshiping somebody, loving somebody, devoted to somebody, surrendered to somebody, and feeling that great love, that great devotion, and the realization of the manifest self as God in you, as you. God is energy, divine being, with divine feelings that like you've never felt before. I just call it the divine, or the life force. And yes, after a while, you can tend to slip back into the mundane, but you always come out of it again. Always something brings you out. Now I'd like us to sit for about 10 minutes, just quietly, feeling the void and feeling love inside.